The U.S. Embassy in Ethiopia says it disagreed with the government's decision to impose a state of emergency to calm potential unrest the day after the Prime Minister's surprise resignation. It condemned the government's decision to impose a state of emergency that includes restriction on fundamental human rights such as assembly and expression. For more on this, we are joined on Skype, via Skype from Washington, D.C., a global affairs analyst, Sam Phatey. Many thanks for joining us, Sam. This is the second state of emergency in 2 years. The reason given by the Council of Ministers notwithstanding, do you think it is acceptable?
Well, right now, I don't think for the international community and for the people of Ethiopia that such a state of emergency at this point in time, especially one that is going to go on for 6 months, and it is likely to be increased to an additional 4 months after the 6 months is over. I don't think most people will find that to be acceptable at all. I think it is a political tactic, and right now the coalition and the ruling coalition is loose, and they are facing a lot of opposition. So they want to maintain some form of legitimacy, and they feel that a state of emergency is the only way for them to be in control and maintain that legitimacy that they always wanted.
But Sam, considering the eruption of violence, killings and destruction of property recently, how would you have expected things to play out from the governments? Are you against the state of emergency as a whole, or the 6-month period is too long?
I believe the 6-month period is what is too long. There may be a need for something like that to get restructured and to prevent coup d'etats from happening. But I think what they need to do is to allow greater freedom, and the government is not willing to do that right now. Now, the fact that there's going to be a state of emergency means that thousands, tens of thousands of people could get arrested. If we could recall back in August last year, by the time they ended the initial state of emergency during the Oromo protest, when it was at its height, more than 22,000 people were arrested. So if they want to put state of emergencies, allow a lot of draconian laws to take place, which means it's going to give the military the license and the police the license to act with impunity, and there is going to be a crackdown on the opposition. So if that's going to be the case, the government is likely to face more resistance, and the people are going to come out more to protest. So which means more people are going to get arrested, and there will be more protest and more violence.
All
and
right.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry for cut. I thought you were done. Let's talk about the U.S. Dimension into this whole discussion now. U.S. has condemned this. They did initially when there was a state of emergency last year, you remember that. But afterwards, they went ahead and gave Ethiopia some development aid and things like that. Now, U.S. has decided to halve what they give to Ethiopia annually. Do you think this will make an impact?
It makes an impact, but it's the first right step to doing the right thing instead of giving Ethiopia entire packages, which means Ethiopia needs to realize that they are on a pathway to having aid to them completely suspended if they are not careful. Now, that may not likely happen because Ethiopia is a very important partner to the United States. So, but I think the U.S. condemning the whole state of emergency is just from a human rights perspective. Now, of course, the Ethiopian government is saying that this is going to have effect on their economic infrastructure, aside from security concerns. So, at the end of the day, when the U.S. action is pretty much just a statement that they would usually give when it comes to most African countries, and that absolutely includes Ethiopia. But I think one thing that we must all be mindful of, including the United States, is that we must realize that the politics in Ethiopia is deeply divided, especially when it comes to tribal lines. And that should be a concern for anybody. So as long as that is the case, then we would know that if a state of emergency is declared, that would cause repression, and that repression is going to allow people that feel like they need to protect each other to come together and fight back.
Absolutely.
And that's going to escalate the tension.
Absolutely, Sam. And talking about the people affected, a bit soothing it is to know that the state of emergency still has about 13 more days to receive legislative order. But how would you advise those who are disgruntled about the developments to further take action to express their disapproval in a civil manner?
I think the African Union has a leading role to play here. Addis Ababa is home to the African Union Commission. And I believe the African Center for the African Commission for Peoples and Human Rights, which is centered in Banjul and Gambia, also have an important role to play. The opposition in Ethiopia, including the opposition leader that was arrested, has to be released. Now, if opposition campaigners are released, now the opposition and the government have to sit down and talk about this. I mean, dialogue is the way forward here for Ethiopia right now. Anything beyond that is just going to send the country into chaos, and we don't want to go back to what happened in the 90s.
Sam, Phatey, will leave it here for now and see how it plays out in the coming days. Thank you very much for your analysis on the News Hour.